Well, that was no fun at all. 30-0 blowout Jets Dolphins. It doesn't get a lot uglier than that, folks. And we have to ask ourselves, did we just see the last of Zach Wilson in a New York Jets uniform? Wilson leaves the game with what was first called a head injury, but not what was first called dehydration, then called a head injury, but not a concussion, then called a concussion. So a lot of back and forth, and who knows what was really going on there. Just an ugly, ugly game. If that was it for Zach, it's a shame because last week he looked, obviously had that great game. This week, I saw people criticizing him today. Are you kidding me? Are you seriously criticizing this guy? This is the first time ever. I've been watching the NFL for a billion years. I've never seen a stat line like this. A graphic that popped up during the game. It said Zach Wilson on his first 11 dropbacks, 3 sacks, 8 hurries. Every single time he dropped back on his first 11 attempts, he had somebody in his face. He was getting hit. He was getting chased. What the hell was he or anyone else going to do in that situation? That is just asinine. I'm sorry. If you're upset at the way Zach Wilson played in a game where when we see the numbers, I bet he was pressured on 85% of his dropbacks. And people are, oh, that's it. No more Zach Wilson. Get rid of Zach Wilson. You saw what he did last week with a little bit of time. And look, I get it. Like, you got to move on because of the fact that you've still got Aaron Rodgers. Zach Wilson is not going to just sit on the bench and twiddle his thumbs for 2 years while Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback for this team. So Zach will move on. But if you're criticizing Zach after this performance, you're absolutely out of your mind. Trevor Siemian, much of the same for him. We saw protection hold up a couple times for him, but really, it was just a disaster. Zach Wilson, likely his last game as a Jet with concussion protocol, short week and all that coming up with, Washington and the Browns, and it's not even worth putting him out there. Mekhi Becton is the other one. Mekhi Becton is either injured or not interested. And I don't know which one it is, and it doesn't matter. He, over the past 2 weeks, has played, I would say, his worst 2 games as a pro. Literally his worst 2 football games as a professional football player. And it's a shame because I like Becton. I've always defended him. I've been a Becton guy, loved him pre-draft, had his back when everybody was jumping all over him. But right now, he's a guy who just gave up at least, I counted 2 more today. He gave up 3 sacks last week, may have given up a third one today. There was one that may not have been on him. But you're giving up 5 sacks in 2 games. That's not a good look. And, we've talked, I talked at length this offseason after he did that interview. I think it was Newsday, whoever it was. And I said I thought that was a really bad look. Like, you're about to get on the football field for the first time in forever. And just before it becomes about football again, you do an interview where you say you got hurt because the team didn't listen to you. They ignored you when you said you were injured. That made it worse, and you're not that happy with the coach. A lot of that, I wondered if that animosity would build and the team would kind of look at themselves and say, no matter what happens this year, we got to let this guy go. So I think what the Jets do this year, I think they let Mekhi Becton walk, and I think they hope someone gives him a decent enough contract that they can get a comp pick next year. Um, let's see what we got in the chat real quick. Too many instances. Too many instances of this in the Robert Saleh era. Listen, this year, and I'm not defending Saleh. I would be fine with them moving on from him, but I just think, and look, people don't like hearing it, and I don't care. Um, Facts are facts, and I've discussed this a million times on the show. You've got reasons and excuses. Like, what's happening to this team this year, it, there's a reason for it. And the reason is they've used 13 or whatever, 12 different offensive line combinations. They've used 6 or 7 right guards. They've used 3 or 4 right tackles. There's literally a different combination of linemen every week. And at least one of them is always a practice squad level player. So that's what's happening. Offensive line, worst play in the NFL. They need to hire Mike Munchak as the coordinator. Um, Listen, I don't disagree that they need to make a change. I don't know that they will. But listen, there's no offensive line in the NFL, and you've never seen an offensive line that's 14 deep or 15 deep or 16 deep. That's what this team would have to be. Um, Lousy offensive line. Look, again, the offensive line it's a different group every week, and some of these guys are practice squad level players, and they're starting. So yeah, it gets ugly every week. But Jesus Christ, 11 dropbacks, 3 sacks, 8 pressures. Literally every single pass attempt, Zach Wilson was hit. There was nothing he could do. There was nothing Zach Wilson or anyone else could do under these circumstances. So, have we seen Zach Wilson's last game as a Jet? I believe that we have. Robert Saleh didn't get into any detail as he shouldn't have with the Aaron Rodgers situation. What's going to happen here now? Or are we going to see Rodgers next week? Rumors that he's going to be medically cleared. Don't play him. If Aaron Rodgers insists on playing this year, and he may very well, just to be able to say, I came back. I got on the field. I played snaps. I logged stats. Maybe throw a quick screen. I'm going to go 1 for 1 on a quick screen, and then maybe hand a couple balls off, and then I'm going to leave and I'll be done. But I want to be able to say I can. If he does that, fine. I can live with that. What we don't need to see is Aaron Rodgers lining up behind center and dropping back and counting on protection from this old line to keep him upright. Because and I just discussed this with Scott Mason on Play Like a Jet. We did his post game. Um, I've seen people say, "Well, so what if he gets hurt again?" And Rodgers himself said it. If I get hurt, I have all offseason to rehab. I don't want him rehabbing this offseason. He just rehabbed this season. How about spend the offseason getting ready to play football, not like learning how to walk again? So the thought of Rodgers taking multiple snaps behind this O line to me is absolutely nuts. Let's see. We need to clean house after this year. Greg, it's not going to happen, Greg. Salah, I think could go. I don't think Joe Douglas goes. I think Joe Douglas, it, you know, I've said this before. I think the backup quarterback thing, I don't think that came from him. I don't think Joe Douglas built this team, traded for Aaron Rodgers, and then left open the possibility that the season would be in the hands of the guy he was replacing. I think this, and there were rumors that the Jets were cash strapped and they didn't want to spend. I would have no difficulty believing that they came to Joe Douglas and said, "You're not spending any more money on a quarterback. You just spent premium picks, huge money on Aaron Rodgers. We owe Zach Wilson $9 million this year. You're not getting another 9 or 10 million or 8 million or whatever for a backup." So I have no problem with that. With now, listen, if we somehow get a reliable source who says, no, that was 100% Joe Douglas who didn't want a backup quarterback, then we can talk about whether or not he needs to be fired. But as of right now, the biggest gaffe for Joe Douglas was the backup quarterback thing, which I don't think was on him. Offensive line, it's all but injuries. I'm not, if I have a general manager who I know can find highly talented guys in the draft, I'm not firing that guy because they're getting hurt. I might be firing him if they've been hurt before and he drafted them anyway. But AVT didn't have injury issues. Becton didn't have injury issues. Those are obviously the two most important guys who have missed the most time. Connor McGovern's been a durable guy. He gets hurt. So all the injuries that piled up, I'm not firing a guy whose job it is to evaluate and find talent, who does a good job of evaluating and finding talent, and then firing him because of their durability. Again, especially if there were no durability issues in the past. The coaches don't know how to prepare a team for a game. Well, they certainly looked that way today. It looked more like they just didn't know how to motivate the team to get up and play. Becton had injury issues. He didn't miss any significant time. Like what injuries? If we're talking, he missed a game or two here and there. Nobody cares. It's football, whether it's college or the pros. Guys miss games here and there. But Becton played left tackle and right tackle in college. No major injuries coming out of college. Strains, sprains. That stuff I'm not interested in. Everybody gets that. There were no huge chunks of missed time, which is where your red flags are. Missing a game or two every now and then isn't the end of the world because it happens to almost every single guy at some point. I've heard people say that before. There were red flags, injury red flags. They were what were they? Like show me the list. How many injuries and how many games did he miss? Because when I looked at his games played prior to the draft, there was nothing glaring that jumped out in terms of missed games from Akai Becton. Again, this isn't to say he may not have missed a game or two at some point, but you don't not draft a guy because he missed a game or two because then you'd be taking 90% of draft eligible guys off your board. That's just not going to happen. But look, they showed up today in Miami. I picked them to win this game. I thought the defense was going to come out fired up. I had a feeling Tyreek Hill wouldn't play. He didn't. And I really thought the Jets defense was going to play well enough. Well, really, let's not even talk about the defense because it's not on them. I thought the offense would do something after last week. Um, again, big guys in the NFL all the time. Being overweight isn't an injury. You could say injury risk, but where's the line? Every year you draft guys that weigh 315, 320, 330, 340. Like, where's the line? And there are big guys who play in the league for a very long time and don't get injured. So, you know, it's part of the reason you're drafting him is because of his size, because he's literally launching other human beings off the off the screen. When you're watching, whether you're watching the game on the game view or the all 22, he's taking guys off their feet and launching them 8, 9, 10 yards away from the play. And part of that is because of the power he generates with that mass. Top to bottom fail again, I don't see it as a failure by Douglas. I know everybody likes to say that, but, he was 364 at the combine. Um, let's see, top to bottom failure. Yeah, I don't again, it's injuries. If we're gonna hold people accountable for their jobs, what about the training staff? Hey, training staff, why do we have 15 guys getting injured on the offensive line every single year? It's I mean, eh, these guys never had injury issues before. And then all of a sudden they show up, they put on the green and white, and they can't say how what was it, Chuck Clark? Never missed a game in his life. He's a Jet for 10 minutes and he's hurt. He's out for the year. And again, it's not even on the training staff. Like these are just it's the NFL. Guys get hurt, but the Jets for some damn reason and I know everybody gets injured and everyone has to deal with injuries. They should have built around Darnold. Brad, water under the bridge. I wouldn't have hated that approach. I could have been happy either way. I think I was ready to move on from Darnold because you just get the fatigue of watching a guy fail again and again and again. It's like I don't think the lights ever going to come on. And look at what's Darnold was handed another starting job in another team and he failed there too and now he's in San Francisco. Where I think we'll see Sam Darnold play a game or two late in the year when San Fran has their playoff spot and everything wrapped up. So we might get to see Sam Darnold play for an offensive genius in San Francisco and see if that changes anything. But nothing was going to, no quarterback was going to change today's outcome. Zach Wilson absolutely under assault. All year, I'm calling for Izzy Abanikanda to get some carries. The last 2 weeks, what, 5, 6 carries, and they just run him into the pile. Run him right into the pile. Lake and Tomlinson can't block anybody. I mean, that guy, what do you do with Lake and Tomlinson? It's a $10 million cap hit, dead cap money, $10 million to cut that guy, and he can't play. What do you do? Do you just eat the $10 million and find a way to make it up somewhere else? There's been talk about do you try to get CJ Mosley to rework his deal? I was convinced. I was convinced that Mosley was gone after this year. But he's played at such a high level that I could see this team saying, "You know what? We'll extend you again or rework your deal to bring that cap hit down from 17 million to 7 million." And then that gives you that little bit of room to move on from Laken Tomlinson. Because Laken Tomlinson just isn't he's not worth the money you're paying him. He's not even close to that. I think you could I mean, we'll have to go back and watch, but I think the left side of the line, the first round draft pick and the big money free agent were probably worse than the journeyman right tackle in Turner and Hanson at right guard. Again, we'll have to see. Jets need to trade down, draft a QB, draft 3 O linemen, says Joe. Listen, Joe, trading down, absolutely. You have to. You've got to move down. You hope the Jets are at 4. Scott Mason, the guy again, and we just talked about this. And I said it to someone the other day. I can't remember exactly where or which app or which podcast. I lose track. But I said to someone, the Jets need Jaden Daniels to have a monster offseason to where somebody is like, yeah, this guy can be a franchise quarterback. And the Jets need to be picking 4 so that they're in position where they're holding that trade chip where they can move down and get a haul of picks. Let's see. Did you see the screenshot? New York Jokes posted to their YouTube community feed. Every single little line guy turned around watching 4 fins. Mark, I don't know which one of the somewhere in the first couple drives, one of the hits or the sacks or the whatever's it was because it happened so quickly, and I just thought this offensive line hates this guy. Like, it's like they all just got together and like, let's get this guy killed today. Like, and let's enough of Zach. It's embarrassing. What do I think of Dan Quinn as a head coach? Not a fan. Go offense. Enough with the defensive guys. I want Todd Monken. I wanted Todd Monken when they hired Adam Gase. Todd Monken has won and produced at every single level, everywhere he's been. He turns teams around. He won the national championship, a couple national championships at Georgia. And people say, oh, he's at Georgia. He was loaded. He beat Alabama. What was he? He was with Mizzou or Southern Miss, wherever he was. His first college job. The team won like 1 game every year for a few years. Within a few years, he's got them winning 8, 9 games. And then he goes to Tampa Bay where he has Jameis Winston playing the best football of his career. And then he goes to Georgia and wins a couple national championships. And now he's in Baltimore where Lamar Jackson might be playing the best football of his career. Get Todd Monken. If you can convince that dude to come in. But again, the Aaron Rodgers dynamic, right? He's so loyal to Nathaniel Hackett. Replacing Hackett is a no-go. Unless, I mean, if it's gotten that bad, it'd be great if Rodgers was like, "Yeah, it'd be okay if you let this guy go." But I just don't see that happening. But if behind the scenes Aaron Rodgers is watching Robert Saleh and thinking, "I like this guy, but he's not very good as a coach, and I'd be okay with replacing him," that would be big. I'd love to bring Rex and Tanny. Listen, I loved Rex as much as anybody, but I don't think that's happening. I was a huge Rex guy. I loved Rex. You trade down 2 times in the first, come back. Listen, Joe, if you can do that, you do it. But as they say, right, takes 2 to tango. If the Jets could trade down to, from 4 to 11 or 12 and then again to 18, 19, 20, and come away with all, go do it. You got holes, go. But takes 2 to tango. You got to have that happen. All the coaches need to go. Look, they got some guys do. Look, Ulbricht's doing a great job. The A lot of the assistants do a really nice job on the offensive side of the ball. You can't really say that. Um, Hackett should be gone tonight. Listen, Hackett never should have been hired. But as we know, Hackett, that was all part of the plan to get Aaron Rodgers in here, and that worked. And then unfortunately, nothing worked from there. Um, absolute disaster on every level tonight against the Dolphins. Defense couldn't do anything. I mean, defense shut down the run. That's about all you could say, really. Um, I don't even. I think I pulled up the numbers here real quick. In case you went over that, yeah, Raheem Mostert, 2.8 yards a carry. A-Chain, 3.6. Jeff Wilson, 2 carries for 5. So, not a bad job there. Tua was 21 to 24, but so much of that was the quick stuff. But look, he hit Waddle on a deep ball. Um, Smoked DJ Reed for a long touchdown, but the Jets couldn't. Brees Hall, 2 yards a carry. Izzy Abanikanda, 2 yards a carry. Dalvin Cook, 1 for 4. There you go. There's Dalvin Cook's breakout game. Um, Garrett Wilson didn't see a target until the third quarter, which is embarrassing. Alan Lazard, 3 for 21. Xavier Gibson, 2 for 29. On defense, not really much to speak of. There was Solomon Thomas had a sack. Quinnen Williams shared one with McDonald, and no picks, right? Yeah, no interceptions. So just a bad game all around for everybody involved. Embarrassing game. 30 to nothing. Like I said, I picked them to win. I thought they were gonna come out fired up. I thought Zach was gonna pick up and, not necessarily have a 300-yard game like he did last week. But I thought, all right, you come out, you throw for 250 plus, 1 or 2 touchdowns, find the end zone on the ground, and you'll be there. You have a chance to win this game. Even with AR, nothing will change. Well, I don't know about that. I mean, we saw Aaron Rodgers light things up in Green Bay with this same atrocious offensive coordinator. A quarterback of Aaron Rodgers' caliber can change everything when he steps on the field. Zach Pook took some punishment. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was he was getting killed out there. He was getting absolutely murdered. As I said at the top, pressured or hit or sacked on 11 of his first 11. Quincy's got to hold on to that. Almost had that pick. He's got to hold on to that. Um, Brees Hall, 12 yards on 6 attempts. Yeah, I mean, like, there's no denying the talent the guy has. But teams are just loading the box, getting after the quarterback. The pass pro is non-existent. Um, Even when it's there, it doesn't matter because you're sending 3, 4 extra rushers because you have no respect for the quarterback. I said 31-19. Yeah, look, Kev, I think I said 24-17 Jets. I really thought the defense was going to come out on fire and the offense would chip away and put up some points late and win this one, but obviously didn't play out that way. So embarrassing game for the Jets. The team should be embarrassed. The coaches should be embarrassed. They are. As I said, Makai Becton. Let's see, Gary joined in. How we doing, Gary? Um, I think it might be Becton's last game. I think you're in trouble with at left guard with Tomlinson. I think obviously Tippmann's all right. AVT's coming back next year, but he's a guy. Look, to me, once you suffer significant injuries 2 years in a row, you're no longer a guy that can be counted on in future years. So we all love AVT. We all recognize his talent, but I think we all understand that Elijah Vera Tucker is a guy that you can't rely on for much more than a handful of games next year. Look, if he comes back and he's healthy, he's plays at his ceiling, he's all pro type talent. But as it stands right now, you know the most likely scenario is that the Jets have to go out and add multiple guys in the draft, have to add multiple guys in free agency because you need some depth. I really want to see, and I just talked about this with Scott that you want to see Carter Warren get a couple more starts. To kind of give you an idea, do you think he can be a guy you plug in as a starter? But I'm afraid that 4 starts, whatever he might get, might not be enough if he's injured again this week. They need to take Joe Alt in this draft. Brad, listen, Brad. It's a deep draft at tackle, and I love Joe Alt, but they can't if they're not taking Marvin Harrison, who I would take in the top 3 or 4. If he's off the board, the only option is the trade. And I love Brock Bowers. Harrison and Bowers are my 2 favorite players in this class. But you can't take you have to trade down and grab another tackle at 15 or 16 or 17 or 18 and add extra picks. You just can't add a guy at 6 or 7 and then not have a pick again until the 3rd round. It just you can't do it. You don't have that luxury, unfortunately. Let's see. We can't lose Becton. Look, Kev, the way Becton's playing right now, I mean, he's given up at least 5 sacks in the last 2 games. And that's not talking about pressures. He gave up the TFLs in the run game last week, just reaching for guys. Like not firing out, just kind of so that's why I think he's hurt. I don't think Becton is right, and it's a shame, but I don't think he's healthy right now. How fast can you chug your beer? I'm not doing that to myself. Jesus, that's the last thing I need right now. I'm already in a mood. I'm using it to try to cheer myself up a little bit. I chugged that thing, and things are going to get ugly in a hurry. I appreciate that though, Frankie. All linemen, all of them trade everything. Everything. If the QB doesn't have enough time, yeah. But again, it. That's why they need as many picks as possible. I want Cooper Beebe in late first, early second. I want a tackle early on. Not 5 or 6 early, but give me a tackle at, somewhere in the mid late teens. Take a tackle there, take a guard in the second. Hopefully add at least one guy in free agency. And again, understanding not you're not going to add all pro, high caliber guys in free agency, but if you can get a mid-level starter at tackle in free agency and then find another one in the draft and draft a guard. Okay, and you add that to Tipman and you add that to AVT. Now you've got 5, 6 guys to choose from, but you also need some depth behind them because again, all these damn injuries. And it's getting harder and harder, folks. I talked about this the other day. Albert Breer sent out a tweet the other day, and it's not like this is any big secret, but he talked about how offensive line play around the league is terrible. And how is the league going to fix this? And he's attributing it to, these the lighter camps, fewer practices, fewer padded practices, basically less time working on the craft coming out of college where colleges are so big on this run and gun, air raid, all this quick drop, just, quarterback get the ball and heave it up and guys aren't having to sustain their blocks for as long as they used to work on that skill. I talked Connie Carberg, the Jets scout, who I'm sure you're all familiar with. I bumped into Connie at a Jets camp a few years ago, and that's what we were talking about. How are you grading these offensive linemen? I watched Oklahoma the other day to get a look at Guyton, who everyone says he's a good player and he has some good reps, but so many reps are under a second and a half. And I'm watching and thinking, how can you get a real feel for how this guy can block? Dylan jumps in, 11 different offensive line combinations in 14 games. It's absurd. What are they at, like 15 different starters now? 14, 15 different starters and 11 different combinations in 14 games. You can't prepare for that. You can't be a GM and be like, all right, season's around the corner. We're good to go. We got 15 starting caliber linemen. No. Most teams don't have 5. So that's why I'm not as upset at Joe Douglas as a lot of people are. People seem to think he should have had 14 starting linemen ready to go. I don't. I think that a starting line that consisted of Becton, of Tipman, of McGovern, of AVT, like that would have been good enough to compete. Dwayne Brown was a little shady, that was a shaky decision, but my thought process was, well, I'm sure they see AVT as his fill-in if he gets hurt, and that's exactly what they did. And then AVT gets hurt. So I'm like, all right, well, now the O-line needs to be 7 deep. Oh, now 8, now 9, now 10, now, okay, 14 deep. This ain't on Joe Douglas. This is on a ridiculous amount of injuries. And it's frustrating, it's maddening, but I'm not going to fire Joe Douglas and then hire someone who I don't know if they can identify talent to begin with. I'm not going to be like, hey, Joe, this guy got hurt, this guy got hurt, this guy got hurt, this guy. That's your fault, Joe. No. Again, these aren't injury-prone guys he drafted. Um, let's see. I think that's meant to say constructed, Highland Prime. How we doing, buddy? Is a winning team. I don't disagree, man. I don't disagree. A lot of people don't want to hear it, but I think this team, if healthy, which is obviously a big if, is a lot closer to being good than people realize. Andy has an even bigger disaster than our O line. You should have been a mod because the replacement starting level type of competence. We have the worst offense in the NFL. Can't give Hackett an excuse. Listen, Hackett's terrible. But it's not just Hackett, but he's a big part of it. Like I said, the injuries are ridiculous. The injuries go back to relying on guys coming off of injury. That is an issue. But the AVT thing, like you're like, okay, torn triceps, like he's a lineman that'll heal and he'll be fine. And then he gets another injury, another a more serious injury. Brown, yeah, again, I think AVT was the plan to replace him. We didn't have to rely on all three without quality depth. Well, I think that's why they go get Schweitzer, who's not a bad player. You brought McGovern back, who's not a bad player. You added Tippmann, so that helps with the interior. I think Turner was a big mistake, but again, that was a Hackett and Rogers suggestion that they bring him in. I think that was a big mistake. Um, Jay Hendrickson joined. Thanks for checking in, man. So listen, ugly game, obviously. Defense was ugly, offense was ugly, and the up front is where it was at its worst. And the offensive line, it was just, as much bad offensive line play as we've seen in recent weeks, months, years. Today was easily, I mean, it's hard to say it was the worst, but it was up there. Like, find me 3 performances in the last few years that were worse than today. As I said, Zach Wilson sacked, pressured on 11 of his first 11 dropbacks. It's no wonder he left with a concussion, which I thought was weird. He leaves the game. They say dehydrated. Like I see him walking off, and my first thought is concussion. He's taken, 10 hits up to that point. Sorry, probably had more than 10 hits up to that point. And then the Jets say dehydration. Like, okay, weird, but fine. And then the half comes and goes, and he's still not coming out, still dehydrated. Well, that's weird because you see guys all the time go in, you get a couple bags of fluid pumped in, and you come back out. And then they say head injury, but not concussion and not concussion protocol. So okay, so first he's dehydrated, then it's a head injury, but it's not a concussion. And then a few minutes after that, it is a concussion. And so Zach Wilson now in concussion protocol, and that's why I think he's done. Um, Kev says offensive line's been so hurt so much. Let's see. O line has again been hurt so much because QB holds onto the ball too long. Um, no, the QB wasn't the problem. The QB hasn't been the problem for a little while now. Zach has had some plays where he holds on the ball too long, but tonight was tonight was just an absolute. It was a joke. It was an absolute joke. And Joe, yeah, that's something we just discussed a few minutes ago. Only counting on Tippmann, that's the only thing he can do. And possibly Warren. Warren was a guy that when they picked him, there were those who said, I actually went back and watched recently. Daniel Jeremiah said it when they picked him. Like this guy could have been picked yesterday. As in he could have been a round 2 or 3 selection, which puts him in that category of like guys you believe can start for you, but he had the injury. So Warren comes in, coming off the injury in college, doesn't get on the field early on this season, ends up getting on the field a few weeks ago, and he did okay. He wasn't great, but for being a guy who didn't play last season, hadn't played much of this year, Jake, Josie, Mitch, thanks for checking in, seeing what we're up to here. We're talking about this offensive line. We're talking about Carter Warren. So Carter Warren's a guy. He gets on the field. He plays a few games. He looks solid, and then he gets dinged up. So now he hasn't played the last couple weeks. But what the Jets need to do is get Carter Warren on the field for the last few games and get an idea like, is this a guy we can move forward with as even a mid-level starter? And that'll answer at least one more question, fill one more hole prior to the draft, prior to free agency, because they obviously need to make a lot of moves there. And they will. But every move they don't have to make helps. And so if they can find out what Carter Warren can do, and if he has something to offer, and you add him with Tippmann, and you kind of pencil in AVT as a maybe, but you're not relying too heavily on him. I think one of the biggest questions, one of the biggest problems the Jets are going to have is what to do with Laken Tomlinson. Do you take that $10 million hit and just let him go? First solid Beningo mess. The Beningo thing, don't get me going. That's probably as much as I don't do hot takes. I don't do yelling and screaming. I get a little into it sometimes, but I don't do that. like, that's not my thing, but I was I think I was yelling a fair bit about the Beningo thing. That was embarrassing. I would have fired of all the things Salah's done, that's the thing I would have fired him for. If I'm Woody Johnson and I'm like, "Dude, you're spending 25 minutes on the phone with Joe Beningo, asking him to be your friend when you're supposed to be getting ready for a football game," that I would have fired him for. Um, Zach isn't concussed. Again, that's more the docs. That's not Salah doesn't make that call. He's coaching the game. It's the docs. It's the trainers and the docs in the back who are giving the status updates on the injuries. Um, so that's not even on Salah. That was just a weird situation, like I said, with the Zach Wilson concussion, non-concussion, and it's a shame, man. Like I said, kid played great last week. Felt like they were finally going to do. But what do they do this week? They come out, run, run, pass, run, run, pass. On the first series, I guess it doesn't really matter because if they tried to pass early, he would have just gotten killed anyway. So, not a great look for the O line. I'm not one bit upset with the way Zach Wilson played today because he had no chance. There is not an op there even even with escapability, Lamar Jackson would not have produced behind this offensive line today. It was just an absolute disaster. Too much, so much to work on this offseason for Joe Douglas. Yeah, oh, by the way, in case you hadn't heard, the Jets are officially out of the playoffs. So for those of you who are planning on buying your plane tickets and your playoff tickets for the Jets, make alternative plans. Let's see. Belichick would have double teamed Waddle. Yep. Put the best. Yeah, that's. Salah does that a lot. Salah lets guys sometimes lets their best player get open and not. But listen, you have DJ Reed, who's also an elite corner. But he got beat today. He got beat. It happens. Happens to the best of them. You know, every corner, every level, no matter how good, is going to get beat at some point. Yeah, drums. That's exactly the point I made earlier. Drums. I don't know if you just joined in. I, I I can't think of a worse O-line performance. Like, it would have to be top 3. If we went back and looked at all of the terrible offensive line performances the Jets have had in recent years, tonight's would have to be, well, I guess you'd say bottom 3. It was, as I said, they flashed that graphic during the game. Zach Wilson's first 11 dropbacks, 3 sacks, 8 hits, hurries. Literally every single dropback, there was somebody getting to him or pressuring him. Um, you can't have that. You just can't have it. Can someone tell me why Hackett's not catching the heat he deserves? He is, Jess. That's the thing. He's catching a ton of heat from everywhere but inside the building because he's got the protection of Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers will go on Pat McAfee and say, "No, the offense works because I won an MVP." You won the MVP because you're Aaron Rodgers. I would imagine you could put Aaron Rodgers in any offense and he would find a way to win and find a way to put up monster numbers because he can line up and he can see what a defense is. Him, Brady, these guys at that elite level, they know what's coming and they'll adjust accordingly and make plays. And that's what Rodgers does. It's not because the offense is good, it's because Rodgers is amazing. That's why he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. If I was calling the plays, Aaron Rodgers could win an MVP because he'd be like, that dude's an idiot. I'm going to audible into this because I know what the defense is doing. And he touchdown, MVP. As no, it's Aaron Rodgers is sort of he's giving Hackett top cover to as his guy, but outside of Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh and one Jets drive, Hackett's getting plenty of heat. In the building, he's protected because he's Aaron's guy. The Jets need to go with scrubs. They kind of are, Stanley. That's all. That's what they're down to. Simeon and Rippon because Rodgers would be dead. Me playing before, yeah. Rodgers, if he's going to get on the field behind this line, I think he wants to get on the field to say he did it. And if you want to bring him on to throw or to hand the ball off a couple times, maybe throw one quick screen to get a completion. And I'm talking quick, like 0-step drop, like snap, throw, get the ball out one time, fine. Um, isn't it about Isn't it just about next year for the biplanes at this point? Um, I don't know what you mean, if it's about next year. Yeah, like, they have to secure draft position and get better players next year. This year is over. Um, it was clear Waddle had Reed's number. Yeah, Kev, they are too stubborn sometimes, and they're often unwilling to adjust and let their top corners cover the top receiver. As you said earlier, Belichick would have doubled the best receiver. Uh, thanks for saying that. Rogers taken over. Yeah, Rogers has. He's taken over. He's running the show. That's why I wonder that what did Bakhtiari I worry that he's going to be a free agent signing next year at the insistence of Aaron Rodgers, and then you're bringing in a guy who has a lengthy injury history. And that's another part of the Joe Douglas thing. Like, I really think that Douglas obviously wanted Rodgers. You want Rodgers. Um, but I think once he got him, it was kind of like, hey, get Aaron what he wants. So Joe Douglas is going out and signing Randall Cobb, and he's signing all these guys who aren't very good, but they're Rodgers guys. And then he can't add a backup quarterback because they've spent too much money there. And again, that's my theory. I can't prove it, but I think that's what happened. I think, and as I mentioned it earlier, I've said it several times. There were rumors this team was cash strapped, which would line up with the fact that they didn't add a second or a third quarterback. Really should have been a second quarterback. Um, and of course, demanded season ticket money like 6 months early from season ticket holders. I think this team was I think it was true that there was some issues with cash. So they didn't have the money they needed. They didn't have a quarter. They weren't able. Douglas wasn't able to sign a quarterback for that reason. But Douglas was told to go out and get Aaron Rodgers, whatever he wanted. So that's why you got Dalvin Cook and Randall Cobb and all these other guys who aren't good. Yeah, exactly. Dalvin Cook. Well, that was the thing. If you remember Hard Knocks or One Jets Drive, whatever it was, you saw Rodgers like talking to Dalvin Cook. He played that guy a couple times a year in Green Bay, and in Rodgers' mind, Dalvin Cook's a monster. But Dalvin, excuse me, Dalvin Cook had clearly lost a step, but Rodgers wanted him, so they wasted that money there. I said at the time, and a lot of people gave me heat for that. Oh, I can't believe you're mad about Dalvin Cook, and I was like, that guy's not an $8-9 million a year guy. I'm sorry, he's not. And it turned out he was way worse than that. I thought, okay, maybe 3 million for that guy, but you wouldn't give him league minimum. Let's see. Zach got buried by Chubb multiple times. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't disagree. Highlander Prime. Zach was getting get that I commented, I said on Twitter, maybe Zach wasn't concussed, but he just wanted to get out of there. And somebody was like, "Oh, people just want to blame this kid for anything." I was like, I'm not blaming him for anything. I don't blame him one bit. If Zach was like, "Man, I'm out. You guys are trying to get me killed," um, I wouldn't blame him at all. Let's see. Even if JD has a good draft, doesn't matter because our coaches don't know how to use talent. Offensive side of the ball, that could be the case, but it could matter because again, I think if Rodgers is back, I think I think that a lot of the coaching is going to be irrelevant because he's going to run what he wants to run. That's what Aaron Rodgers does. It's unbelievable. Trash Beckton is our best tackle on the team because listen, Stanley, I said during the game, I tweeted it out. I've said it on the show since. These last 2 weeks have been Mekhi Becton's worst games as a pro by far. So bad that I don't think he's healthy. I think something is hurt, um, and he's playing through it, which still isn't a great look because of his injury history. Either that or he's not invested. Like he's checked out, which I hope isn't the case. I'm not saying it is the case, but the only reason Mekhi Becton should be playing the way he's playing right now is if he's hurt or checked out, and neither one is good. And that's why I've gone from looking at him as a guy that I think they're going to tag. I've said all along, you franchise tag him for a year. If he plays well, you look at a long term deal after that. I don't think that happens anymore. Um, Dolphins' last shutout was against us in 2020. Feels a lot more recent than that, although 2020 isn't that long ago. Ulbrich, new head coach. I've heard that. I know there's a lot of praise for him right now, and he deserves a lot of praise. I just have a really hard time seeing them going offense again. Um, and my biggest fear is that if they do decide they want to move on from Salah, does Aaron Rodgers dictate the hire and say, give my guy Hackett another shot? And now you've got Nathaniel Hackett from being a bad offensive coordinator to being a bad head coach. Becton will be lucky if anyone. Listen, Stanley, given the state, and I said this earlier, I talked about the Breer tweet, the Albert Breer tweet. Offensive line play around the league is so bad right now. Becton is getting signed, and maybe quite quickly. Teams are just dying for O line help, and as bad as Becton's been, teams will look at that, and again, especially if he's dinged up, and if that'll get around, the teams will know, like, okay, he was hurt. They're not gonna have teams don't have a choice. They have to sign guys who aren't very good. Offensive line is talk. It is Clayton. It is, but it's you literally have backup level guys starting. And Laken Tomlinson's been a colossal bust. There's no other way to put it. And I hate to say it. I said this the other day. I hate talking about I hate talking about Randall Cobb and I hate talking about Laken Tomlinson because they're both bringing so little to this team. Really, they're hurting the team. And everything I've heard about them, everything I've read about them, every time I watch them address the media, I'm like, these might be two of the nicest human beings on the planet. And I, more than anything, like I root for good people to strive to thrive. I do. But you got to call it like it is. And they haven't been good. And I hate that. I want nothing more, not just because I'm a Jets fan, but I want nothing more than to come on and say, Tomlinson's doing a great job, and Cobb is an integral part of the offense, and these guys are doing a great job. I wanna be able to say that because not just because 'cause they're Jets, because they're good dudes, but they're just not playing well. They're playing really poorly. And I don't know what the Jets the Tomlinson deal is particularly troubling for the Jets. Um, Organization's worse in football. Zach should beg to be traded. Maybe a team Clayton, that's the story. The story out of that newspaper in Utah was that Zach and the Jets have agreed to deal him after the year, or the Jets have agreed with Zach that they will deal him after the year, and that's probably where Zach is right now. Zach, as I said, when I saw him walking off the field tonight, I thought, I wonder if he's just like, I'm leaving. I'm good. I don't You have a concussion? I don't know. I don't know if I have one. I don't care. I'm leaving. Whether I got a concussion or not, you guys are gonna get me murdered out there. I'm getting hit on every drop back. Um, I literally have 2 or 3 games before I'm getting traded. I'm not gonna get my back broken or whatever or some major injury before the season ends. Season's over. We're out of the playoffs. I'm not on this team anymore after a couple more games. I honestly couldn't blame him if that were the case. I'm sure Zach would be happy to play. Zach would be if when the Jets trade Zach, I think he's going to do cartwheels from Florham Park all the way to that team's front door. Like that, happy is an understatement. No matter where he goes, I think Zach is going to be absolutely thrilled. It's going to be another offseason where we read about Bill Cow. Bill Cow. Listen, Bill Cowher is a great head coach. Was a great head coach. Do you really want to bring a guy in who hasn't been in the league? What's it been like 18 years, 17 years, 50? A lot of years. Even Rex. Someone mentioned Rex Ryan earlier, who I loved, but the game has changed so much since the time Rex left. Cowher left twice as long ago. Todd Monken, he's the guy. Get Todd Monken, but again, it's going to be Saleh, and I worry that if they do move on from Saleh, Rodgers is going to press for Hackett. But it's going to be there was a lot of talk, a lot of the beat writers on Twitter saying that after a game like this, nobody should be safe, and I get it. But I think the piece was it Zach Rosenblatt? I think from the Athletic. I'll say it was him. I hope I'm not wrong. I hate when I say the wrong writers, but said that the plan is to run it back next year with the same group, and I believe it. This is a team. Listen, we're so damn fed up with losing as we should be. They've done plenty of it, but this is a team, whether we like it or not. When they were healthy, and the Jets thought they knew what they had on paper, there were people picking this team to go to the Super Bowl, and I think that's the way Woody Johnson is looking at it. Woody Johnson is looking at this and saying, "We have a Super Bowl team with a ton of injuries, and if you look at the way this defense is played, and if you imagine this offensive line." With a healthy AVT, a healthy Connor McGovern, shoring up that interior. Again, the Dwayne Brown thing, which basically this team would be at the very least heading to the playoffs and a deep playoff run. If it was Rodgers, if you had McGovern at center, AVT at guard, or even AVT at tackle, go AVT at right tackle, Tippmann at right guard, McGovern at center, Tomlinson begrudgingly at left guard, and then Becton at left tackle. This is a team that could do some damage with this defense. So I don't see any major changes coming. Let's see. If the Jets lose out, Bears win one game. Patriots beat Denver. Jets pick third. Is that right? Is that right, Joe? I looked earlier. I thought the best the Jets could hope for was third. Was fourth rather. Um, mm, or maybe there's something in your scenario that I don't think is plausible. What did you say again? Let's look. If the Jets lose out, which is plausible. If the Bears win a game, that would be difficult to imagine. Let's see who the Bears have. The Bears have the Cardinals, Falcons, Packers. The Bears could win a couple. The Bears almost won today. That's a shame. If the Bears would have pulled that off, things would be looking a lot better for the Jets right now. But yeah, they gave up some points late and they ended up losing. But the Bears, of course, you have the Redskins this week. If the Redskins manage to beat the Jets, that would be huge. Um, and if the Patriots beat Patriots aren't beating Denver. Patriots are terrible. They're as bad as the Jets right now. They might be worse. Why would anyone the pressure from New York media? Listen, I'm sure there are some guys who will run from it, but you can't pro athlete, man. You gotta pressure cookers. There's a lot of pressure. I know New York can be the worst, but especially now with social media and Twitter, like anyone from anywhere can see and comment on anything. So really, there's pressure everywhere. But it is worse local in your local area when you have a million microphones in your face instead of four, which is what happens when you're New York, say, versus Green Bay or somewhere like that. The Jets will need to get as many extra picks. Exactly, Stanley. That was my point. Is that if the Jets are in the top four, the Jets have to hope to be in the top four to get a bounty of picks. As I said, we just discussed this on Scott's podcast on Play Like a Jet. Um, I wish reporters they're not going to ask Hackett if he's going to retire. Kev, Hackett's a lifer, man. He grew up watching his dad run terrible offenses, and now he's going to run a terrible offense until he retires, and he's going to hope that his son or daughter grows up to run a terrible offense. Connor McGovern wasn't good, but McGovern's like a middle of the pack, even slightly lower, middle of the pack guy who this line would be better if he was at center and Tippmann was at guard and AVT was at tackle. Like this would be a better offensive line. Tomlinson's not going after the ball and that fumble was sad. I let me see. Oh yeah, the first one I didn't. That was and he had a few plays where I'm like Tomlinson's job is, to help Zach Wilson up. Like, that's what Laken Tomlinson gets paid to do. He gets paid to get on the field, stand up at the snap, and then help Zach Wilson up off the turf. McGovern wasn't considered a starting center. Depends on, like, by whom, depending the Jets said he would compete for the spot. He won the spot. He was their starter. He's been a starter, for his whole career. Started at guard with the Broncos and then moved to center with the Broncos and started at center for the Jets. Um, and then he started for the Jets again this year, so he's always been a starter. Now you want to say he's a low level starter. Maybe some people consider him that. I think he's a mid tier guy. Which again, with that whole combination, that would have worked out just fine. But I think we're gonna wrap this one up now. Want to thank everyone for tuning in. Frustrating year. Jets are officially. I 3-4 weeks ago I said this. Playoff hopes were gone. And now they are officially mathematically gone. That's, the way it goes sometimes, right? And with the Jets, it's the way it always goes, or at least has 13 years without a playoff appearance, longest in the NFL. There's always next year, right? We'll see what happens. Some draft news. Um, I will be heading down to the Senior Bowl in Mobile. Gonna do the whole week down there, cover the practices, cover the game, gonna get as many player interviews as possible. So I'm gonna be flying out from England. I'm gonna spend a couple nights in Boston. Uh, and then I'm gonna fly from Boston to Mobile, spend the week in Mobile, and then come back to England and have plenty to talk about on the show. We'll probably be going live we'll definitely be going live during the week. Plenty of content coming from Mobile, and I want to get there because this is a big draft for the Jets. Um, Good opportunity for the site to cover it. We've covered it the last couple years with Dylan Turman. He may or may not be coming this year. That's still up in the air. Um, Highlander Prime, thank you very much. Appreciate that. I haven't been back to the US since pre-COVID. It's been like, I don't know, 5, 6 years since I've been to the US. That's even having spent all these years, or well, all those years in the military, I don't think I ever went 6 years without being in the US. So that's not been great. So I'm looking forward to going back. It'll only be for 8 or 9 days, but there will be lots of draft content for Jet Nation, for this show, for this pod, for you guys to jump in, engage, ask about players, and we'll cover as much ground as possible. Hopefully, Dylan, Chris Schubert will be there too. All of it's up in the air, but we're doing our best to get situated, coordinated, and all get out there. That'll do it for this one. Have a good one, Jets fans. Ugly game. Playoffs officially out of the picture, and Commanders next week. Maybe, like it or not, Aaron Rodgers under center. We'll see. Have a good one.